Hello, all. I'm Daniel Coolbaugh. Welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I have with me today a very special guest, Holdt. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
Excellent, excellent. And do you want to give us just a quick little introduction on yourself before we get started with the questions?
Yes, of course. I'm an author who currently is publishing a trilogy about Vikings and Norse mythology. The first one, Northern Wrath, came out last year, and the second one, Shackled Face, just came out a few weeks ago. And the third one comes out next year, which I'm very much looking forward to. Then the trilogy will be done. I am Danish originally, so from Europe, but currently live in southern France.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. Well, I've seen book one has been everywhere lately. I feel like every single, like I follow a lot of different, book bloggers or, just different authors, writers and stuff. So you have, just been all over Twitter lately, which for me is really cool to see. So it's, it's awesome,
I feel like it's really been embraced.
Yeah. I feel like it's so value, and all of a sudden it was just like the week after that was like, bam, all of a sudden everybody had your book everywhere. And a couple friends of mine were like, hey, because I teach history, they're like, this is definitely like a book up your alley. And I actually just won a gift card to an independent bookstore yesterday, Friday. So I got trying to get book one, and then I got like GD Penman I was interviewing yesterday, trying to get his book too. So it's gonna be really fun. So I really look forward to reading book one.
Very cool.
And of course, I saw book two. Saw book two. Blew up my feed the last really like 3 or 4 weeks. It seems like, so really excited for you there. It's been really awesome, to see the progression for book one, book two, and see how different people have embraced it. I feel like Norse mythology's been, really on the rise lately, and
it really has. I feel like already last year when Northern Wrath was the first one of mine came out. There's this guy over on Twitter, Alex from Spells and Spaceships, who started a thing called Norse-vember, where all the way throughout November, he does Norse blogs and things like that. And that just took off. And so many different people on Twitter suddenly, were reading Norse-themed books or talking about Vikings. And he's doing it again this year. So I feel like it's really making the community grow and making people interested in this particular era and this particular mythology.
I mean, it's definitely, I like how, and we're going to get into this with questions, but I personally like when I'm, was looking at Northern Wrath and, really looking at, what it was about. It really resonated with me. And like Scott Oden and I and a couple other people were talking about your book one, and just how, like we're really big into mythology and things like that. Dirk Ashton was another one. We were talking about your book. It just seems like, I don't know, we just really like how the mythology is, is really entering fantasy and urban fantasy more. And I don't know, it's really nice to see like Norse November. To me, it's just really, really cool. And you just got to wonder what else can we add to it later. And I just think it really adds to the genre. So it's been really nice to see.
Thank you. That's very cool. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot happening in this genre at the moment as well, and fantasy as well. I feel like there's a lot of things that are more rooted in the historical and different kinds of myths and things like that coming out, which I find very cool.
Yeah, I just think it's, like I was just talking to GD yesterday and to Scott Oden about this, and Sean Bell on Friday. Like, it just seems like, I don't know, I'm just so tired of the typical, I try to keep my fantasy world not the typical Western European, which I know seems weird because then, like Sean Bell and I were talking about, like we really like the, the Norse mythology, but it's different than putting yourself in I think a typical Forgotten Realms setting. Where it's Western European, because you're taking, your book and, actually making it in that time period and then putting those, fantasy elements to it. It's totally different. It's almost like a historical fantasy almost, or a mythological.
Exactly. Yeah,
fantasy.
I think it leans more towards historical fantasy, and then with the myths added more and more as you progress within the story. But definitely started as a historical novel as well, and then grew into the fantasy realm with all of the myths and everything getting involved.
See, that's really cool. That's really cool to know, because I'm thinking, I was talking to GD about this. Like, I have one that I just think is like a fun project. And I like books like yours because it really, shows that people really like that type of fantasy. And, I think it, it really leaves a wider range of like, what can we actually do in the genre? It's really nice to see, both of your books being, so successful and so many people reading them, because it really, I think, lets credence to the fact that, this is a really, good route to pursue. And yeah, we've had like Scott Oden and I were talking about that, with like his Gathering of Ravens, I'm about to start really soon, and it's along the same lines as yours. And I think most people, when you look at fantasy, think again of just the typical, D&D or stuff like that. But
I think the genre is really evolving, and more so I feel like so many different things are being done and being tried out. And it really shows that there is an audience hungry for something new, whichever way you take it, whether you take it a historical road, whether you take it an unexplored path along a different culture or something else. I feel like there's so many different new things being done in the genre today that really shows that the fantasy readers are there for it. I mean, we all love fantasy. We love new worlds. We want something that's slightly different or very different from what we're used to.
Yeah.
And that's something very unique that you can get within fantasy.
Yeah. And if you guys, for our audience, have not seen book one yet, just make sure, because I love the cover arts that you're doing too. Like, I'm not really like and I'm just gonna be honest, I'm not a really big like I love the classic scenes and things like that. And to have a weapon or something, and it really captured me right away. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And then I read the book description right away and checked out your Twitter. I was like, follow right now, like, didn't even hesitate.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing, as an author, traditionally published author, you can't really control how the book is going to be marketed and wrapped and everything, but I just feel like I was really lucky. I got an editor who definitely highlighted what's in there as well, so I feel like it's not false advertising. You're actually going to get what you see on the cover. That is pretty much what describes the book.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, I was very lucky.
Yeah, I just think it was a brilliant decision by everybody all the way around. It just it really pulled to me and spoke to me. And I've had quite a few people that we've had on where we've been chatting before we started recording. I know a couple of people mentioned while we were recording, where they just really loved that cover. It pulled them in right away. And
that's really cool. Yeah,
both of them, I think, really, your entire trilogy, is well named. Especially book one and book two. So we were discussing advertising, just from the cover and your book description, but more importantly the title, and the titles. And to us, it just really screamed like, exactly what we want from a fantasy, trilogy.
That's really cool. Yeah, I feel like titles is something that's really difficult to capture as well, and usually it happens quite late in the process, once you've actually finished it and you know what it's actually about and you're able to get a title.
Yeah,
I feel like that's probably what we struggle the most with book 2 and 3. We found them pretty late.
Oh, okay.
The titles, but I feel like book 2 especially really captures what it's all about, even though I hadn't realized it when we were thinking about titles. And book 1 as well obviously completely captures what happens within the book. But that one was a bit more obvious for us to come up with. But
oh, okay,
that's very cool to know that it does resonate with people, and it does you're kind of feeling what's going to happen.
So you would say then, just as a side question real quick before we get started with the actual one, so for Northern Wrath, would you say that title came out earlier than the other two then?
I would say so. I mean, Northern Wrath, actually, I wrote it as 2 different books that I then joined as one later on in the process. And book 1 was called something different, but book 2 was called Northern Wrath. And there is a reason within the story. There's an object, or there's a ship that's called Northern Wrath within the story. That's kind of a big object that kind of signifies a lot of things that does happen. And so that was kind of a natural title for me to pick, because I felt like it was a cool name, and it kind of explains what happens within it. And so when I joined those 2 books into one, it seemed like the obvious pick for a title.
Oh yeah. That's really cool. And I have to say, like, like we were discussing, that like that's just such a cool title. Especially for the niche of the genre that you're trying to fit into. Like,
exactly. I feel like it speaks to the right kind of people who they know what they're going to get when they see a title like that. So the people who are into that, they're going to gravitate towards it, and the people who aren't, well, they know from the start, okay, that's not going to be my thing.
And I really like too, my friend right away when book 2 the cover came out, and the title, like he sent it to me right away. He's like, Shackled Fates, like check this out, and we were both really blown away by just the title and the cover art, and it just seemed like everything pulled together really, really nicely. And it was so interesting to see like how you guys did that after the success of book 1. Like I feel like that, like, Northern Wrath's kind of a hard title to
it's a difficult one, right?
A lot of people, I feel like, kind of fall flat with both with book 2, and you guys stuck it
feel
right
like
in
titles
later.
are so difficult as well. I mean, it's such a short thing. You kind of wanted to represent what the book is about. You kind of wanted to say something about who is it going to appeal to, and I don't know, it's tough.
Well, we felt like you nailed it.
Thank you.
My friend, he's like, so you're getting book 1 really soon? He's like, I just need to buy you book 2 for Christmas. And I was like, well, usually I get a lot of gift cards. I said, but if not, I said, yeah, feel free. I said, I'll just go and wait for book 3 or something like that, and use the gift card then. But yeah, that's awesome. Well, we're really happy to see all of your success, and we really hope it continues. So we really liked everything.
Thank you. And thank you for embracing the book and everything. I think it's really thanks for the community, especially the one that's grown on Twitter and so on. That's the books have found kind of their audience, their core audience, the kind of people who are going to respond to it.
Yeah, no, totally. Hope it keeps growing for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. For this first question, now I'm just really interested, especially as you were talking here, just about a little bit of the process and things like that for book 1.
Yeah.
What has your writing journey been like up until this point?
That's a really good question. I feel like a lot of writers, when they're young, they always dream about being a writer when they grow up, and that was definitely not my experience. I was a kid who loved books, but I never thought about writing them. It wasn't until I went to university studying writing, funny enough, that I thought, oh, hey, hang on, this is pretty cool. This is pretty fun. Why can't I just continue to do this?
Yeah.
So yeah, I studied creative writing at university in England.
Cool.
And I chose that kind of as a fallback thing because I wanted to study film. And then the morning I had to put in my applications, I realized, hold on, no, I don't want to study film. What am I going to do then? And my whole world kind of escalated. I didn't know what to do. And so I looked through all of the possible things I could study, and I found that creative writing was an opportunity. And I thought, okay, it's kind of within the artistic field. So if I do change my mind again in 2 months, I probably would be able to switch back.
Yeah.
And also, no matter what I'm going to do afterwards, it's probably pretty good to be able to put my thoughts into writing. Maybe that's a pretty neat skill to cultivate.
Yeah.
And at the time, it was something I really struggled with. I liked drawing, but I could never capture what I was thinking about on the page. Same with writing. I just couldn't do it. So I went to university specifically to learn how to do that, how to capture what was in my mind. And as I studied it, I just started to find it. I found it so much fun. It was just fun to sit and write and to see what I had in my head come alive on the page. And the more I did it, the more I felt like, I just want to try to follow this path. And so it was pretty late in the process, while already studying it, that I realized that this is what I wanted to do. And then I continued to study a master's degree. And doing that, I wrote the first part of Northern Wrath.
Oh, wow.
So that's when I did that. And then once that was done, I tried to find an agent, which took a while. But I succeeded in finding a wonderful agent. And we worked on that for a long time on the book. And that's when I joined the 2 manuscripts into one, made one book, because I had found him with one manuscript, and then I'd continue writing the next thing. And we joined them together, and we found a publisher for it. Yeah, so that was a process that took a few years. I think probably longer than I expected when I decided to set out on the road to become published. But, that's the kind of thing you don't really know until you try it. You realize, oh, wait, everything does just happen pretty slowly in this industry. Okay.
Especially with the pandemic. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, but even before then, I feel like things just take time.
Yeah.
We have a proverb in Denmark that is "Slid men vid, ting tager tid," which means work hard but acknowledge that things do take time. And I feel like I have repeated that to myself like a mantra for years. You're gonna get there. You're gonna get there. Just keep going.
That's a really good one. I'm gonna quote you there for the episode. So that's really cool. That's awesome. For number 2 here, so like we talked already, a little bit before we started getting into the questions. So you've combined Norse mythology and epic fantasy, and I feel, and a lot of people I've talked to have said the same thing, into this new and refreshing way. How did you come up with this idea?
Well, as I briefly mentioned earlier, it actually started as more of a historical fiction kind of thing. So I was doing full-on research on Vikings. I thought I was definitely just writing historical fiction about Vikings, until I realized at some point, in order to really write about the Vikings, I needed to write about what they believed in, because that was such a big part of why they acted as they did. And the more I realized this, the more the gods and the myth and everything started to find its way into the story. And so that I pretty quickly realized, okay, I am writing epic fantasy, just very myth and historical based, very focused on the actual history of the Vikings and the real time period, but also very focused on the gods as they were. And so that just started to blend together because I was exploring that culture, and I couldn't do that without exploring everything that they believed in.
Yeah.
I mean, the Vikings, they went out and they raided because they believe if they die in battle, then they're going to go to the awesome afterlife where they get to feast with their gods and all of their friends and just have a blast every night, and then go out and fight each other and be reawakened to another great feast, you know. Yeah. If they didn't have that belief, they probably wouldn't have gone on as many raids as they did and, you know, been the kind of culture, been the kind of society that they were. So their beliefs was a very, very big part of what made them go out there as adventurers.
Yeah. And I like how you said that, because a friend and I, we're discussing doing, like we wanted to do historical fiction for Native Americans and, do like a trilogy, but we're having that same issue, because I think they're very similar, to Norse mythology and just the culture, because, you really can't separate the spiritual, or the culture. And yeah, so when I was saying that you were coming on, he was like, oh, so that'd be a really good idea, to kind of talk about these questions, because there were kind of some different things we were wondering. So I'm really glad that
okay. So you're having a similar kind of experience that I had with the Vikings. We started realizing that actually their beliefs is what makes the culture as it is.
Yeah.
I feel like also the language is very, very much comes from their belief as well. So the way they talk about certain things, the way they think about certain aspects is very much connected to the understanding of the gods and their myth and everything. At least for the Vikings, that has been my experience. So I couldn't separate the two. After a while, I just had to accept that, they came hand in hand, they came together.
Yeah. This is such a cool concept, just to already take what's there and just write it. And I think it's a brilliant idea. So we're really excited.
Thank you. I feel like it's a lot of responsibility as well, because I feel like a lot of people either know a lot about it or feel like they know a lot about it or want to know a lot about it. And I feel kind of responsible for not misleading them in my portrayal in certain ways. So I feel like it's a lot of responsibility, but it's been a lot of fun too.
No, I totally understand. I'm like a project I was talking about earlier. I just want to do like a really cool, I want to discover where the Lost Legion was, and like what happened to them. So I'm gonna mix it with zombies. And I'm like doing the research. I'm like, man, I'm really gonna have to. You're gonna hit the historical fiction, crowd. At least somewhat, or historical fantasy. You gotta nail it. So I think you're totally right with that. Yeah, it is a big responsibility.
Yeah.
That kind of gets me into the next question for question 3. So what is one thing about your writing process that you find the most helpful?
Honestly, for me, because these are pretty big books, I mean, people might be just listening, but they're around 600 pages each. So they're pretty big books. And in order to write that many words and that many pages, I feel like having sort of a habit or a schedule where, at this kind of time every week or every day, however often you write, you're going to actually sit down and get some work done. I feel like it's important for me to have a particular space and a particular moment in time where I go, okay, this is my writing time, this is my writing space, and I'm just going to go for it. Because otherwise I end up sitting and doing all sorts of other things and the book takes forever to write. And eventually you reach that middle point that's just difficult and you just have to keep going all of the time. And if I don't have that schedule, if I don't have that routine, I find it's easy to end up not doing as much as I would like to, and I probably should be doing, especially at the times where it's not just easy peasy anymore. Because at the beginning you have a lot of energy and you just, and this is exciting and it's wonderful. And you reach the middle bits and you start to reach a few, more difficult bits, and the ending feels kind of far away and you really have to put in an extra effort. So I find like the most helpful thing for me has been having a regular schedule, somewhat at least. And it can change over time, that's fine. But as long as I know, I'm going to go down there, be it, Sunday morning, and I'm going to get some writing done.
No, I think you're totally right there. I'm really lazy when I don't set my schedule. I find I get guilty when I have a schedule, I don't follow. If I don't have a schedule, then I don't feel guilty. And
I feel like having kind of an open schedule that you can adjust. I like to adjust my schedule. So the day before I decide exactly what I'm going to be setting myself as a goal the next day. So I don't feel too overwhelmed. And if it's, if I'm a bit sick or something like that, have to feel bad that I can't do as much, because obviously every day is not going to be the same.
Yeah.
And, especially with writing, you have certain chapters that are more difficult than others, certain sections of a book that are more difficult. And so I feel like if I adjust my expectations to my output, that usually helps me.
Oh man, I think that's brilliant advice. I think I actually need to try that more often.
I recommend it. It's worked for me, so I recommend it.
Oh, that's very, very helpful. I think a lot of people who have, like me, have not thought of it in that way. So I think that's great advice. Great advice.
I also feel like when I set kind of my expectations the night before or the evening before, I end up, just before going to bed, I end up thinking about the story, and that actually helps me the next day, because I wake up with sort of knowing. I feel like I've worked on it during the night while I've been sleeping, even if you haven't, of course, but it's been somewhere in my mind.
Yeah. So
I feel more ready to write the following morning when I wake up. I feel like, okay, and then I start thinking about it naturally.
Wow, yeah, that's actually, that's both of those are really, really good points. Yeah, I should try and do that, write more subconsciously. For this next question, I'm really, really anxious to hear your answer for this one. How did you go about your research for North myths for this novel, especially in the time period, especially since you said, you started off as a historical fiction. So how did you start that research and writing process?
Oh, goodness. Okay, I go insane with research. So I go way too in depth compared to what I probably ought to do.
Well, apparently
I'm the kind of person who will keep moon charts and, write maps about what kind of trees grow where and everything. But where do I start? So, I mean, for me with the Vikings, it started a bit naturally because I am Danish. So I was born in Denmark and I grew up with the Norse myths. So I started with already being familiar with a lot of the elements and all of the gods and things like that. So I started up brushing off on what I already had, the sagas that we did have at home. I started reading those and getting back into it. And with the myth, I found that with Norse mythology, there are two main sources. There's the Poetic Edda and there's the Prosa Edda. And the Prosa Edda was written by Snorri Sturluson, an Icelandic man, Christian. And I feel like it's a very Christian version of the myth. So while I read those, I felt like the Poetic Edda, which was also written down by Christian monks, but I feel like that was more representative of their culture. And so I really focused on that one and trying to discern who they were. Actually, while researching the myths, what came up as the most important, again, is the history. So the real people who came up with these myths, who were they? Why did they come up with these myths? Why were they so important to them? And that comes from what kind of society they had. Who were they as people? What was important to them? I feel like when you work those two things together, again, as I said before, they come hand in hand. I couldn't separate them one from another. So I really started there. And as I got dug deeper and deeper, I would go to museums and so on in Denmark. And I ended up joining a Viking Age warship. The crew of a Viking warship.
That's cool.
That I've sailed with for a few years and still hope to get back to once the world calms down a little bit. And that was a really good experience. I feel like the practical research that I did probably enlightened me more than anything, but it could only really enlighten me because I'd done the physical. So I already did the literary research and so on. And so I was very open to it once I actually arrived at the ship, and I had all these questions, and I could just take in the experiences and just layer my knowledge.
Yeah.
So I feel like ending with the practical is really what made it feel real to me as well, made the Vikings feel like real people. I felt like I understood their beliefs better, their beliefs in the gods. Why did they have those? Things like that after actually getting to the practical research. That's when it really all came together to me.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. I feel like a lot of people will find that answer very, very helpful. Like I said, I talked to a lot of people where, we're just really, really just over that typical fantasy. So yeah, and I obviously talk to a lot of historians and things like that just because of my job. So, and a lot of them really enjoy fantasy because if you study a lot of history, you want a little bit of the fantasy side.
You can pull things from so many different places as well. And if you study history as well, it's a really interesting one to be able to play with. Yeah. What if something was different? What if they had this kind of different technology as well? Fantasy can do that as well.
Yeah.
Open whole new realms of possibilities.
Yeah. Well, I can't remember which one of my friends I was talking to, but one of them, like a fellow author, he's like, well, you're already a historian. He goes, you've already done these things. He's like, why not just do half that and then half fantasy?
Yeah,
He
why
referenced
not?
the book, and I was, your trilogy. I was like, oh, yeah. I was like, apparently people really like it. So he goes,
Yeah.
"It's not half the work." He goes, you already have a bachelor's degree for it. He's like, you might as well go from there. So I thought
Yeah.
that was really funny. But yeah, that's a great answer. For our next one, how did you go about world building and incorporating these Norse myths and these different figures into what I and others have called a seamless and breathtaking landscape?
Well, thank you, first of all. And I think, again, I started with the historical. So I started with a very specific historical event that starts at the beginning in, well,
Oh, cool.
around 100 pages into Northern Wrath. There is an event that happens, and that is a real historical event.
Oh, cool.
And so I started, when I was starting writing, I really started to focus my research around that event, that time period. Who was the leader at the time, who was king, who was the leader of these different groups, and what were their philosophies like. And yeah, I actually feel like a lot of it just emerged kind of naturally because I'd done so much research before starting. So I feel like everything was on my mind, was lying in the back of my mind. And that's how the mythology kind of got into it as well, because I would write one thing that suddenly I would feel, oh, that's very similar to something I read about the mythology a while back. Let me just go back and have a look at that. And I feel like I started to weave different things together while writing because I'd done so much research. It was just sitting there ready to be used. Yeah. As for the myths and everything, yeah, I think the difficult part there was to not make it feel too out of place, especially when you're starting in a very historical setting. Yeah. So I started very historical, and slowly the myths and the fantasy and the magic starts to weave itself in. And so how do you present these myths and these gods like real people, and like they fit in the world, and they aren't just, oh, why is there suddenly a god in the middle of the road? What happened here? Where did we go wrong? Where were all the signs? And I feel like just adding small mystical elements at the beginning, even during the historical part, is really what helped the reader feel like, oh, there's going to be some more of this coming. I feel like we're going to go deeper and deeper into the magic. And I think a lot of that was added in the editing process. So once I'd already written through it once and I was going through, I felt like, oh, I can add a little bit of mystical piece here, a little bit of mythology here. So to really help the reader, guide the reader along.
Also kind of like signposts, like, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. You can call it kind of foreshadowing, right, as well. Yeah. Kind of giving small hints to what might come, that there might be more behind these scenes than what you might immediately think.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I have a friend, Christopher G. Brenning, and he does that very similar thing in the Hellborn King. Grim Dark Fantasy, and because at first it's like, it seems like it's more of a historical fiction book, just with like a different named countries and like empire and stuff, and then he really does a great job sprinkling that through. I kind of liken it to, and my friend said your book was very similar, Northern Wrath was very similar to like the Vikings TV show, where it's historical fiction, but they do a really great job foreshadowing and sprinkling in those different mystical or supernatural elements. So they feel very seamless, and it just seems
they feel part of the world from the beginning. I think that's important, so you don't suddenly feel like it's taking a left field and now you're left just not knowing what's coming.
I think that's a great point, and excellent advice. Great answer. For this next one, so what is one piece of advice you have for someone who's trying to combine these different myths and pantheons into this type of fantasy setting? You kind of already talked a little bit about it, but
yeah, we already touched a bit on it. I think the main thing would be to try to pay attention as you're doing your research to where things overlap. Because for me, this is something I started with thinking it was historical fiction. And so I didn't really think deeper on it until I was already into the fantasy element. And then I had to go back and weave things in. But if from the beginning, I'd been more aware of where the history and the myth intertwine and overlap, I might have been better at bringing in things from the start and not have as much a bigger job in the edit.
Yeah, I have not considered that before. Going through, I have like a urban fantasy where I'm taking like want to add a Valkyrie and do like an urban fantasy there, but now you have me rethinking my entire process for that.
Oh no, sorry.
Which is definitely a good thing. But yeah, I think that I think that's great advice, and we're gonna have some people doing the same thing, going back to their manuscripts and being like, wait a minute, because I think that's where I got stuck with the outline a little bit more,
Yeah.
was not doing that. So I think that's really
Yeah,
good.
I think that's what happened to me as well with book one as I was writing it. And at that point where I realized, wait, I need to get into the myths more, I need to get into the gods and their beliefs. At that point, it would have helped me to think about it that way, to look for certain things that I could overlap that were already there. So I could easier make that transition. But yeah.
It's kind of like you're looking at a treasure map and the X's are there.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. Like you're combining two different maps, right? You have two
yeah.
different maps and you're trying to figure out how they match.
Yeah, work smarter, not harder, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Now all of a sudden after this interview, you're going to see all these, historical fantasy books pop up because you just made it so much easier for everybody in the writing process.
Well, I hope so. That would be cool.
Yeah.
I wouldn't protest to
Credit,
that.
though. We're going to give you credit for the Northern Wrath wave, as we'll call it. So, well, that's excellent advice. As we're wrapping up here, I'm actually really curious to see who are some authors or books that you would recommend to our audience. It doesn't have to be, it can really just be anything that, you're reading that you really enjoyed. A couple people this weekend, had talked about historical fiction, fantasy, sci-fi, writing books. It's real. A couple people mentioned poetry that really helped them in their fantasy and their historical fiction. So it's really just whatever comes to mind for you.
Cool. I have a few. The first I would probably say is Joanne M. Harris, The Gospel of Loki. Because when I was writing Northern Wrath, at a point I realized that, hey, hang on, everyone is not Scandinavian. Everyone might not actually know the Norse myth. Maybe I ought to have to explain and talk about these Norse myths as well, so that it'll be easier to follow. And as I was writing it, this book came out, The Gospel of Loki, and it's a retelling of the myths, the Norse myths with the gods through the point of view of Loki, who is, a lot of people's already favorite character in most Norse-related myths. And she just weaves it together really brilliantly. And reading that really took a lot of pressure off my shoulders, because I feel like, okay, I can point people towards this book and I don't have to hold the entire responsibility of the myths anymore. I can just tell my story and focus on that. So that one I always recommend if people want to know a bit more about Vikings and the Norse myths. And then currently I'm reading a series of books that I'm really loving. I'm taking my time with them because I don't want them to be over, and I just want to live in the world and enjoy them a lot. And I feel like I read a few pages and I just want to go and write. I just want to go and sit and write. And so I use them as inspiration when I feel like things are a bit tough. Then I pick it up and I read a few pages and suddenly I want to write. Yeah. And that is Anna Smith Spark.
Oh, yeah.
One, it's The Empire of Dust. I just feel like there's so many great ideas and so many great things to think about, especially as an author, that it's just full of inspiring ideas.
Oh, that's excellent.
So yeah, those would be my main recommendation at the moment.
I'm putting a list together for the website because a lot of people, like I said, are really into it. So I'm gonna give you guys each. I'm gonna put the episode that we talked, and then I'll go ahead and we'll put like a little description for you guys. And then we'll put those author
recommendations.
Cool. And then the next time, if you guys come back, whenever that is, maybe you've read something new, we'll do that episode, your description, and then we'll put it there. So I had that recommendation by a couple different people for a couple different podcasts. They're like, yeah, we wish we did that sooner. Yeah. And I'm like,
oh, cool.
Okay. So I decided, to start doing it. Wizards was one of them. Jed Hearn was starting to do that, and he's like, oh, there's just so many now that we've talked about in 2 seasons. And I'm like, well, I'm not even halfway through season 1 for mine. So I said, I'll start to do this now the next couple weeks, and then we can kind of go from there. But I know a lot of people had talked to me about it.
We're all going to have our TBR list completely destroyed.
Exactly. And it was like, well, you're going to be the sole result of, like all these people going from a hill or a TBR mountain to like a mountain range. And I said, no, there are other authors that have, given me the recommendations. So to be fair, we're all to blame when everybody, doesn't have any to buy all these books. Including yours. So for this last question, thank you. I'm really anxious. I know a friend just recommended me, actually, I think it was Scott Odin was talking about The Gospel of Loki the other day to me. And I know Anna Smith Spark was has been on my list for at least the last like 4 or 5 months. So thank you so much. Definitely have to check both of those out. Definitely the Gospel of Loki for sure, because I love
my recommendations. So.
I love both of those. Excellent. So do you have any news, updates, promos, or sales or anything like that going on currently?
No, we just had a sale that finished, but when new ones come out, I do advertise them on my Twitter. You can find me at Holdt, KOLDHOLDT, both on Twitter and Instagram. So currently there's not much, but the second volume in the trilogy, so Shackled Fates, just came out a little while ago with a lovely, beautiful cover. And yeah, and I'm looking forward to next year when the third one is out and the entire trilogy will finally be out. That would be really awesome.
It's gonna feel really good. So we'll definitely have to have you on before then so we can help push those sales and those pre-orders and things like that. So
happily.
And that's awesome. Well, this is where we're going to stop today, folks online. So please make sure that you go and check out Tild's website, Twitter, all those great things. I'm going to put all those in the YouTube description, the Spotify description. So just make sure you guys check those out. That's the main reason we're doing this podcast. So we definitely, again, want to thank everybody for tuning in to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. You can find this video on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and the audio is on Spotify. Thank you again to our tech guy, David, my best friend, who helped us figure out the Spotify after like 3 months. Make sure you're checking us out at Scholars of Uma, that's UMA at gmail.com. Again, that's in both of the YouTube and Spotify description. You can find that email, which is my primary one anywhere. Let us know who you'd like to see on the podcast. If you want to pass any messages on, to Tild or anybody like that we've had on, or, any questions you have for them, please let us know. And, we'll relay those to them. Feel free to send us any videos or pictures that are fantasy or sci-fi related. Tild, once again, really, really appreciate you coming on. I've been wanting to get you on for a while after, my friend raving about Northern Wrath. So I'm actually going to get done here and actually go and order that one right now with my gift card.
Really I hope you enjoy it, and thank you for having me. It's been really great. Yeah,
and don't forget, guys, this will be up really soon, so don't forget to take part in Norse November and check out both Northern Wrath and Shackled Fates. So thank you again for coming on, and I hope to see you soon and talk to you on Twitter, my friend.
Yes, you too. Talk to you soon.
Have a good rest of the day.
You too.
Bye.